Chu Qing was a lonely NEET whose job application had been rejected 40 times for being too damn ugly. However, everything changed when he claps a 1,000-year-old samurai chick who likes long swords. The story began as he rushed home one rainy day, completely drenched and defeated after being rejected for his 40th job interview in a single month. As he reached the staircase of his apartment, he encountered a strange girl dressed in a kimono and wielding a sword. That moment, they came so close that they were practically inches from an accidental kiss. The intensity of her murderous glare sent shivers down Chu Qing's spine, making him stumble back in fear and drop his room key. He couldn't help but stare at the psycho before him. Immediately noticing her ancient sword and medieval sandals, he wondered where the nutcase must have sprouted from. However, Chu Qing had already been through enough madness for one day, and the last thing he wanted was to deal with more craziness. He decided to ditch her and slipped into his apartment. Inside, he headed straight for the fridge, grabbing a cola to calm his nerves and cool off from his miserable day. Several hours passed, and Chu Qing finally decided to check if the weird girl was still lingering outside. Peeking through the peephole, he didn't see anyone and sighed in relief, thinking his tactic of ignoring the maniac had worked. But when he opened the door, he found her standing right there, breathing down his neck. Startled, Chu Qing realized this girl wasn't going anywhere, so he offered to call security to help her get home, assuming she was lost. That instant, the girl finally spoke, asking Chu Qing where she was. The question was so silly that it left Chu Qing momentarily stunned, making him wonder if she'd been snorting powder. He told her she was in the city, trying to keep his tone neutral. She then asked who he was, and he sarcastically replied that he was her friendly neighbor, just like Spider-Man. She went on to reveal that she was a disciple of the Salt Gang and wasn't sure why she had ended up there. Chu Qing, now convinced she had either escaped from a mental asylum or was seriously off her meds, decided to play it cool. He invited her inside while he called security, figuring this was the quickest way to get rid of her. As he dialed his uncle Zhao, the resident security guard, for advice, Chu Qing nearly choked on his words when he saw the psychopath impale his flat-screen TV with her sword. At that moment, Chu Qing stared at her in utter disbelief, briefly imagining dragging her out of his apartment by her hair. But seeing as the girl was wielding a sword, he had no choice but to keep his cool. So in the calmest tone he could muster, he asked the deranged girl for her name and which psychiatric facility she had escaped from. She replied and told him her name was Jiangyi. Realizing she might just be lost and in need of help, Chu Qing asked what he could do for her. Jiangyi revealed that all she wanted was to go home and reunite with her Salt Gang. That's when it hit Chu Qing that Jiangyi was probably lost in the space-time continuum and had emerged from a space rift. He decided to test his theory by asking who the Emperor was. The mere mention of the word Emperor made Jiangyi's eyes light up with excitement, and Chu Qing quickly followed up, asking for the name of the Emperor she knew. Jiangyi hesitated but eventually said they were in the 11th century. Shocked, Chu Qing pulled out his phone to verify the emperor of that time and discovered it was Tang Xuanzong, the 7th emperor of the Tang dynasty. While this conversation was ongoing, they heard the food delivery man knock on the door, which alarmed Jiangyi. So she pulled her sword to be Sakai, the food delivery guy, in a flash who was disturbing their peace. In that split moment, Chu Qing rushed in front of Jiangyi, wondering if she was serious, so he yelled at her to calm the heck down and hold her horses, saying that it was just the food guy. After much convincing, he managed to retrieve the food without anyone getting skewered. Chu Qing then offered some of the food to Jiangyi, but she declined, still suspicious of everything in this new world. She then asked why Chu Qing had short hair, explaining that only those rejected by society or in exile would dare keep such a hairstyle. Later on, Jiangyi casually mentioned that she had taken a stroll around earlier, which made Chu Qing's heart skip a beat. He could already picture the trail of chaos she must have left behind, given how quick she was to unsheath her sword without any reason. Shortly afterwards, Chu Qing pulled out a hamburger, but the sight of it made the cave girl stare at it like it was some kind of alien artifact. Chu Qing then offered her a bite, but after several minutes of intense scrutiny, she cringed and flat-out refused. So Chu Qing offered her a soda instead, thinking he was being a nice guy, but he ended up irritating the out of Jiangyi, who made a move for her sword to vanquish the worthless face completely. In a moment of clumsiness, Chu Qing dropped the can of Coke, and the black liquid spilled onto the floor. On seeing the black liquid content, the weirdo assumed it was poison, strengthening her resolve to quickly send Chu Qing to his maker. Without warning, Jiangyi's power slammed Chu Qing to the ground, standing over him with her blade to remove his. Realizing he was toast, Chu Ting frantically tried to explain to Jiang He that the drink wasn't poisonous. To prove his point, he quickly stood up and chugged a big gulp of it. Afterward, he stared at Jiang He, thinking hard about how to handle this sword-wielding maniac. His options? Kick her out and let her star, call the cops, and get her locked up, or become an internet sensation as the boyfriend of a Stone Age chick. The last option suddenly seemed like the best play because this was the only chance a failure like him would ever get at dating a girl, so he chose to keep the ancient Supergirl. So he offered Jiang eat a hamburger again, but she demanded that he take a bite first to prove it wasn't poisoned. After reluctantly taking a bite, she still refused to eat it, so Chu King promised to whip up a rice bowl later instead. With that settled, he asked Jiang He to put away her sword and have a seat so they could talk like sane human beings. As she sat, Chu King thought of pulling out his phone to capture the greatest scene where an ancient vixen sat on a sofa for the first time but dismissed the idea. Realizing the truth he would expose might cause Jiang He to have another schizophrenic episode and pull out her sword. Chu Ting then asked Jiang He to drop her sword on the table, which she did. That moment, Chu Ting broke the news to Jiang He that she might not be able to return home because she was really far away. She asked how far, and with a deep breath, Chu King told her she was 1,200 years too far. The revelation hit Jiang He like a boulder, her eyes widening in shock, so she yelled at Chu Ting that he was capping hard and was nothing but a disgusting liar. Chu Ting, trying to keep his cool, explained that the world was vastly different from the one she knew, but Jiang He struggled to wrap her head around the insanity he was spitting. Undeterred, Chu King further revealed that everyone she had ever known, everyone from her time, had long since passed. That moment, Jiang He had heard enough of the bull and decided to leave, but Chu Ting grabbed her hands to stop her from leaving. Chu Ting wanted Jiang He to accept him, but the only thing that would accept him was her sword, which she aimed directly at his Minecraft-shaped head. Just then, Jiang He had a momentary flashback to the first time she met Chu Ting. Despite her initial suspicion, she realized that his actions toward her had never been evil. Their meeting had been purely accidental, with Chu Ting simply heading home from work like any ordinary boring guy. Slowly retreating, she asked Chu Ting why he was helping her. Chu King shrugged and responded that meeting a girl who should be put in a museum wasn't a flex encountered every day by most people, so obviously he was fortunate enough to have been chosen. He then pointed out that she couldn't keep pulling her sword on everyone in this age. Times had changed, and the world now was all about peace. Chu Ting assured her that if she stuck with him a little longer, they might figure out how she ended up here and even find a way to send her back to her time. Hearing this, Jiang He thought deeply and decided it was best to listen to the voice of reason. So she chose to stay and act like a sane person since she had nowhere to go. Chu Ting then asked her to put her sword down, and he would order a meal for her. Reluctantly, Jiang He dropped her sword, and Chu King took her to the bathroom to shower since she smelled like she was given birth to in the dumpster. On getting to the bathroom, Jiang He was flabbergasted because she had never been in one in her entire life. So Chu King explained the system and how she would shower without slicing through the place out of frustration. He also gave her a crash course on taking a shit and washing her hair. Afterward, Chu Ting rummaged through his wardrobe, only to realize he had no female clothes. So he handed her one of his old shirts. A few minutes later, while Jiang He was in the bathroom, Chu Ting eyed her sword and briefly considered if he could sell it as an antique for some easy cash. But before his imagination could run wild, Jiang He emerged from the bathroom, finding him scribbling something down. When she asked what he was doing, Chu King disclosed that he was making a list of things to buy since he would be wifing her for the time being, so it was only reasonable that he got some female stuff. Shortly afterward, Jiang He complained about the shirt Chu King gave her to put on as being awkward. Chu Ting then tried complimenting on her BMS look, but Jiang He gave him a sharp look, warning him not to say anything flirtatious or any other word he would say would be with his maker. That moment, the delivery guy arrived with the food and Chu Ting pleaded with Jiang He not to act moronic by unleashing her swords. Few minutes later, as Jiang He, she revealed a saying the second commander of the military used to tell the soldiers. She disclosed to Chu Ting that a person who does something without gaining anything is probably a thief. However, she assured Chu Ting that she didn't think he was helping her for any interior motive. She believed he was a good person, maybe too good for his good. After Jiang He finished eating, Chu King told her it was time for a serious conversation. He explained that the world was much safer now, and she needed to let go of the habit of constantly reaching for her sword. He clarified that the TV wasn't some alien device designed to destroy humanity, but merely a source of entertainment for losers like himself. Chu-Ting emphasized that while the world was generally safe, her tendency to treat every situation as a battlefield, constantly armed and on edge, could make it a dangerous place for her. Following this enlightenment session, Chu-Ting showed Jiang He his identification card, explaining that every citizen was assigned a unique number at birth by the government. He warned her that anyone caught without such an ID could be taken away by the police for questioning and investigation. As Chu-King pondered how to handle Jiang He's lack of an ID and the potential trouble it could cause, he suggested the idea of hiding her from the public eye to avoid run-ins with the authorities. But upon hearing this, Jiang He erupted, accusing Chu-Ting of trying to treat her like a refugee. Chu-Ting calmly explained that her situation was actually worse than that of a refugee, and was more like a slave without a contract, which shocked Jiang He. Noticing how petrified and uneasy Jiang He was, Captain Kindness assured her that his life goal would be to help her get acquainted with the world and settle slowly. However, Jiang He was unfazed by Chu-King's sweet attempt at assurance and doubted his sincerity due to how beaten up his face looked. She sadly revealed that she didn't need some ugly freak looking over her shoulders, and all she wanted was to go back home. Hearing the unappreciative girl whine and complain, Chu-Ting asserted that if she didn't believe he would protect her, she could as well forget about everything and leave. But seeing her vulnerability, she reluctantly agreed to his help and asked what she needed to do. Chu-Ting replied that the first step was for her to put her sword on a leash and stop drawing it at the slightest provocation. Soon after, Jiang He, unaware that Chu-King was a sore loser who had been more single than a dollar bill, asked why he was staying alone and where his wife was. That instant, Chu-Ting flushed in embarrassment, so he replied, telling Jiang He that he was just a useless, single dog fascinated with Manhwa. Sensing Jiang He was probably uncomfortable living alone with him, Chu-Ting showed her a spare room littered with all his garbage. So he cleaned up the room, brought in a mattress, and informed Jiang He that she would be staying in the room from now. Chu-Ting then wished Jiang He good night and urged her to get some rest. All through the night, Chu-King lay awake, replaying the day's bizarre events in his mind. He couldn't believe how, after going out in search of a job, he had come home to find that the universe had decided to bless him with an ancient warrior woman as a house guest, out of all 6 billion people on Earth, most of whom were far more appealing. The following day, Chu-Ting woke up late, jumping out of bed, hoping that the previous day had been nothing more than a weird dream. As he headed to the sitting room, expecting that he was good and that his life had returned to normal, he suddenly found Jiang He sizing her isekai machine. Panicked, he tried to hide, but her sharp eyes had already locked onto him. Realizing there was no escape, Chu-Ting awkwardly stepped forward and asked if she was hungry. Without warning, Jiang He dashed into the room with the speed of lightning, returning with 2 silver coins as a gesture of gratitude for his help. On seeing the silver coins, the greedy idiot thought he had hit a gold mine. However, he realized that collecting payment from a lost girl who needed his help reduced his stees by 1,000,000, so he returned the coins to her. He then informed Jiang He that he was heading out to buy her some clothes since she couldn't keep dressing like a character from the Flintstones. However, he warned her not to cause any chaos while he was gone. Later that day, Chu-Ting went to the store and bought a few sets of women's clothes. As he walked around the market, he stumbled on a store that sold female lingerie and thought of getting some for the ancient he kept in the house. Hours later, Chu-King finished buying everything he could for Jiang He. He even picked up a few books to help her learn about the 21st century and how she could adapt to the modern world. On his way home, he ran into his uncle Zhao, an old pathetic security guard who was compensating with his nose. Zhao informed Chu-Ting that there had been recent reports of a thief in the neighborhood and advised him to keep his doors and windows locked at all times. A few minutes later, Chu-Ting barged into the apartment like an idiot, as expected. His head was nearly dissociated from his body by Jiang Hesward, who mistook him for some intruder. He quickly reminded her to calm down, insisting that the world was safe, and handed her the food he had brought back. Jiang He thanked him, but noticed his response was a bit cold, so she asked if everything was okay. Chu-Ting admitted that he had expected her to call him young warrior as a sign of gratitude. Jiang He begrudgingly called him young warrior, immediately regretting it for the rest of her life. They then sat down for some instant ramen, and Chu-Ting was floored by how fast Jiang He slurped the noodles. He couldn't help but wonder if she was genuinely lost in a time warp or just a nutjob. After lunch, Chu-King presented Jiang He with the clothes he had bought, But when she saw the lingerie, the clueless dumbass mistook it for a slingshot. Chu Ting frantically explained that it was just for the plots only and nothing else. Following this, Chu King handed her the books, explaining that they would help her get up to speed with both modern trends and traditional Chinese culture. He considered teaching her about computers, but when he noticed her yawning like she hadn't slept in centuries, he suggested she take a nap instead, and they could continue later. Just before she went to rest, Zhang Yi asked Chu Ting about his status in the modern world, catching him off guard. Sensing it was a loaded question, Chu King carefully responded that he was just an ordinary graduate, still in the middle of job hunting. Zhang Yi's expression soured as she thought about her own home and the seemingly impossible task of returning. Chu Ting, finally putting his few brain cells to work, asked how she ended up in his world in the first place. Zhang Yi explained that she had been chasing a small thief through a heavy rainstorm. In the confusion, she lost her way and while searching for the thief, came across a tall building, which somehow led her to this strange, unfamiliar world. Curious, Chu King inquired about her military rank and martial arts skills. Zhang Yi revealed that she was regarded as the most powerful among the officers. Hearing this, Chu Ting got excited and asked how high she could jump without injury. Pointing to a nearby 4-story building, Zhang Yi nonchalantly disclosed that she could jump from the top of it without a scratch. The revelation about Zhang Yi's martial arts prowess made Chu Ting excited, and he eagerly begged her to teach him the ways of Kung Fu. However, his enthusiasm was quickly shattered when Zhang Yi bluntly told him that he was too old and weak to master Kung Fu, and that no amount of determination or perseverance would make a difference. Undeterred, Chu King asked to at least learn the basics, hoping to become Bruce Lee and defend himself against a few thugs and bullies. Reluctantly, Zhang Yi agreed to teach him and explained that the first step was to train his waist. On seeing Zhang Yi demonstrate the waist training technique by pushing forward her floodgate like she needed her oil changed, Chu Ting nearly lost it and almost screamed, so he retreated and told Zhang Yi that he didn't want to learn that style just yet. Still determined, Chu Ting then pleaded to learn the sword techniques, but Zhang Yi pointed out that his hands were soft and fragile from probably too much hand relief.
Emotional damage.
Upon hearing this, Chu King's heart dropped that moment because Zhang Yi's observation of him was more accurate than a GPS on caffeine, so he sadly asked Zhang Yi to go try on the clothes he got for her instead. As Zhang Yi went to change, Chu King seized the opportunity to grab her sword, trying out some moves he'd picked up from watching too much anime. Just then, Zhang Yi caught him in the act and wondered what on earth the goofy act was doing. Chu King tried to explain, but the moment he saw how stunning she looked in her new outfit, he was utterly mesmerized. That moment, he wished to make her his coffin because he would love to be inside her.
Stop it. Get some help.
Later that evening, Zhang Yi peeked out from her room and noticed Chu Ting engrossed in his computer. Curious, she approached to see what he was up to. Chu King smugly explained that the system he was using was far beyond her IQ level. Irritated, Zhang Yi asked why Chu King was lazing around at home instead of working. He casually informed her that staring at his computer all day was essentially his job for now. A few minutes later, Chu Ting, still fascinated by Zhang Yi's martial arts background, asked her about the martial arts skills of the chief from her village. Zhang Yi proudly mentioned that her village chief was extremely strong and skilled in combat. Hearing this, Chu King decided to show her a martial arts anime on his computer, which left Zhang Yi stunned. She marveled at how such incredible fighting techniques could be displayed on the screen. Seizing the moment, Chu King asked her if her village chief was as powerful as the anime characters she had just seen. Zhang Yi explained that the people in her village didn't possess such godlike abilities. As she continued watching, her eyes widened when she saw an anime character unleash a powerful Goku-like hand movement, leaving her visibly stunned. She turned to Chu Ting, asking if the people in his world were actually that strong, capable of such overpowered abilities. Chu King chuckled and reassured her that it was all fake, the work of washed-up actors trying to mimic the ancient martial arts masters. Curious, Chu King asked again if her village chief had strength comparable to the anime characters, to which Zhang Yi responded that while the people of her village weren't capable of such superhuman feats, the only person who came close was the second in command of their military. In an instant, Zhang Yi demonstrated a hand movement reminiscent of the anime, sending a jolt of fear down Chu King's spine. Witnessing that high-level skill rekindled his interest, and without thinking, he began begging to be taught as if his life depended on it. Zhang Yi, amused, promised as she walked to her room that she would teach him some martial arts, which left Chu Ting absolutely geeked. Inside her room, Jiang He brooded over Chu King's incessant pleas for martial arts training. She began to suspect that his only reason for helping her was to use her as a tool, a martial arts instructor. After a few moments of doubt, she shook off the thoughts and decided to focus on her own training instead. Meanwhile, strange sounds began coming from Jiang He's room, and a puzzled Chu Ting wondered what the creepy antique girl could possibly be up to. He thought about checking on her but felt too tired, deciding instead to take a quick nap before investigating. Several hours later, Chu Ting woke up, his curiosity piqued again by the odd noises. Determined, he decided to check on Jiang He and see if she wanted to go out for that stroll. Upon reaching the room, they prepared to head outside for a stroll. Chu Ting instructed Jiang He not to speak or respond to any questions while they were out. He also sternly warned her not to engage in any of her usual mentally deranged stunts out of the blue. Afterward, he took out his phone, thinking about taking a picture of her, and asked her to smile. However, when she did, Chu Ting was utterly horrified and wondered why Jiang He hadn't trained her Draculian smile instead of her combat skills.
That one there was a violation, personally I wouldn't have it.
He quickly told her to never smile again in her entire life. As they approached the door, Chu Ting noticed Jiang He gripping her sword tightly. He then asked her to leave it behind, assuring her that it wouldn't be necessary, since 90% of the people outside were like marshmallows who couldn't even do 2 push-ups. Moments later, they stepped outside, and Chu Ting began showing Jiang He the city. Just then, a reckless, useless loser biker sped past them, startling Jiang He. Chu Ting quickly calmed her down, assuring her that he would never leave her side, unlike her father.
What do you mean by that?
As they continued their walk, they unexpectedly ran into Chu King's aunt, who immediately recognized Jiang He's odd, familiar expression. The old, ugly woman who looked like she had fallen from heaven revealed that she had once seen Jiang He on a staircase holding a sword, but had ignored her, assuming she was just another weirdo smoking the bamboo. Upon hearing this, Chu King defended Jiang He, fabricating a story that she was dressed in ancient garb for a TikTok cosplay trend. His nosy, grumpy aunt was happy that Chu King could finally get a girl of his own, because she was starting to think he would be forever lonely because of how ugly and disgusting his useless face was.
And I've decided that I want to die.
Just then, Chu King grabbed Jiang He by the hands and dragged her out of the awkward situation. As they continued roaming the street side by side, Jiang He sighted a fast-moving car and was utterly fascinated. Chu King tried explaining the physics surrounding the automobile industry, so he told Jiang He to think of the car as a horse stuffed with a metal body. However, his crazy explanation made matters worse for Jiang He, who tried imagining it but ended up losing a few screws in her head. Later on, they viewed a surveillance camera, and Chu Ting informed Jiang He that the camera was used to capture everyone and everything going on in the street, which scared the shit out of her. However, before Chu Ting could finish his sentence, the insomniac picked up stones and aimed to destroy the camera completely. But Chu Ting yelled at the menace incarnate, asking if she had lost her mind. Afterward, they continued walking down the streets, and Chu Ting showed Jiang He a traffic light, explaining how it worked. Later, he decided to buy her a hairband. After trying on a few that made her look ridiculous, they finally found one that suited her perfectly. As twilight set in, they headed to a restaurant for dinner. During the meal, Chu Ting noticed that Jiang He seemed unusually quiet and wondered what might be bothering her. After they finished eating and started heading home, Chu King tried to lift Jiang He's spirits but quickly realized she snorted depression for a living. He then told her that once she resolved the issues surrounding her identity, she would finally be able to go out as she wished, find a job, earn money, and live a fulfilling life. However, his words were useless as Jiang He's only desire was to return home. Chu King explained that returning home would be nearly impossible, as she was 1,200 years into the future, and no time machine existed. At that moment, Jiang He seemed to understand the gravity of his words and asked how she could resolve her identity issue. Chu King reassured her that he would help her figure it out, but in the meantime, she would need to adapt to this new world. However, Jiang He soon grew anxious and asked Chu King what would happen if she couldn't resolve her identity issue. Chu King explained that without sorting it out, she would remain an unregistered citizen with no civil rights, no access to food, and no shelter. He further emphasized that without a valid ID, she wouldn't be able to rent a place and would end up living like a homeless hobo. Jiang He then asked if she could just skip getting an ID as long as she found a place to stay and a way to make money. Chu Ting informed her that without proper identification, she wouldn't be able to do simple things like get a phone line, create online accounts, or even apply for a bank card. Realizing Jang Hee's brain might explode from information overload, Chu King suggested that she study some books to understand better how the modern world works. As Jang Hee left for her room, Chu King scrolled through his phone and came across the contact of an old friend, Kin Hao, who was a local police officer. He thought Kin Hao might be able to help with Jang Hee's ID situation, so he sent him a message on WhatsApp. So they agreed to meet sometime soon to discuss the matter. A few hours later, Chu King took off his clothes to shower, but suddenly remembered that he did not live alone. He lived with a crazy, psychotic ancient chick, so he quickly bolted to the bathroom to avoid to be seen. Meanwhile, Jang Hee, who also needed a shower, sneaked out of her room to also avoid being seen. The next day, Chu Ting bought a writing tablet for Jang Hee to help her improve her writing and communication skills. Shortly after, the food delivery arrived, and as Jang Hee ate a hamburger, Chu Ting informed her that he'd be linking up with his friend Kin Hao to discuss how they could solve her identity crisis. Before leaving that evening, Chu Ting set up an online account for Jang Hee so she could contact him in case of any issues. He then pleaded with her not to smash or impale his laptop, especially during one of her psychotic episodes, thinking he might be trapped inside the screen. A few hours later, Chu Ting arrived at the meeting spot and found his old albino friend, Kin Hao. As the two sat down, Kin Hao suggested they have a few beers while chatting. Chu Ting wondered if it was appropriate for a cop to drink, but Kin Hao assured him that since he was off duty and out of uniform, he could drink until he couldn't see his own feet. Shortly afterward, they ordered food and drank until they were both buzzed. Kin Hao, now tipsy, began whining about how unfulfilling his job had become. He had joined the police force thinking it would make him as cool as an Avenger and boost his rise with women. But in reality, all he did was mediate couple disputes and handle petty squabbles between elderly neighbors. Chu Ting, uninterested in Kin Hao's sob story, cut straight to the point, explaining the issue about the identification card without revealing that it was for Jang Hee, who was currently living with him. Kin Hao explained that it was nearly impossible for someone without any form of identity to get an ID card. He stressed that obtaining identification wasn't as simple as buying vegetables at the market. It was a complicated process. Growing suspicious, Kin Hao began probing Chu Ting about who precisely needed the ID. In response, Chu King lied, saying he was asking on behalf of his ancestors. Kin Hao, sensing the excuse was total nonsense, grew even more curious. Kin Hao went on to explain that if the police discovered someone without any form of identification, they would conduct a full investigation to ensure the person wasn't a criminal or someone who had isekai'd another person and was trying to conceal the crime by seeking a new identity. He added that if the individual had simply lost their memories, multiple databases would be checked to uncover their identity. He concluded by saying that no one just appeared out of nowhere. There would always be some record or trace. At this point, Chu Ting, annoyed by Kin Hao's attempt to sound smart, decided to humble him. He reminded Kin Hao that he was still a worthless loser whose biggest accomplishment as a cop was mediating arguments between old ladies, which enraged Kin Hao. After a few more drinks, both Chu Ting and Kin Hao were completely wasted. Chu Ting, feeling generous, offered to pay for their meal so they could head home. As he approached the counter, the cashier informed him of a special discount that included takeaway food at a low price. Thinking of Jang Hee, he decided to take advantage of the offer and get some food for her. After bidding a tipsy goodbye to Kin Hao, Chu King headed home. Upon arriving, he found Jang Hee asleep on the couch. As he moved closer, her centuries of military experience kicked in, and she immediately became alert. Chu Ting, unfazed, handed her the dinner he had bought. They shared some yogurt together, and as Chu Ting headed to his room, he realized he felt an unusual happiness. For the first time in his otherwise mundane life, he felt a sense of contentment returning home to find someone waiting for him. Until now, his only real companion had been his cat, and even that was more about free food than affection. Later that night, Jang Hee took a shower and used the hairdryer Chu King had taught her to operate. As she dried her hair, she thought about how fortunate she was to have met Chu Ting, who had been patient in helping her adapt to this strange new world. However, she also realized that relying on him too much wouldn't be wise in the long run. The next morning, Jang Hee found Chu Ting in the living room, staring at his laptop. Curious, she approached him. Chu King explained that he was just watching the news and mentioned that he was planning to go out for breakfast. He asked if she wanted to join him, but Jang Hee refused and told him to go alone. Unbothered, Chu King shrugged and left the apartment to get breakfast. As soon as he stepped outside, he bumped into the old geezer Zhao and his crackhead auntie, Chang, who asked him if he had heard any strange noise while sleeping last night. Upon hearing the question from the old man, Chu Ting couldn't help but wonder what the crazy old association was on about this time. So a random dude, who resembled Saitama after getting pummeled by the Hulk, chimed in, explaining that he hadn't slept well for nights because his dog had been barking nonstop as if something was terrifying it. Zhao then mentioned that the building's CCTV had captured an eerie figure lurking around the building at night. Intrigued, they all decided to check the surveillance footage together. As they watched the video, they saw something moving at an incredible speed, leaping across the building. Seeing this, Chu Ting immediately knew only one crackhead was crazy enough to pull off something that wild. To cover up for his Stone Age wife, Chu Ting told the group that it was probably a vengeful ghost on a mission. Surprisingly, the shallow-headed old people believed him, and Zhao assured everyone he'd keep a closer eye on the situation over the next few days. Relieved, Chu King hurried back to the house and, upon entering, angrily confronted Jang Hee. He demanded to know why she was prowling around the neighborhood like a lost ninja in the dead of night. Shocked that Chu King had found out, Jang Hee asked how he knew. Chu Ting revealed that the surveillance cameras had captured her nightly activities. However, Jang Hee reassured him that she always covered her face during her midnight escapades. Relieved to hear this, Chu King sternly warned her not to venture out alone anymore and to only leave the house with him. Later, Chu King searched online for a movie about an ancient warrior who was transported to the modern world and eventually got into trouble with the police for their stubbornness. Thinking this might scare Jang Hee into behaving, he wanted to show her the video as a subtle hint to stop pulling off her Catwoman stunts before she drew too much attention. Sensing the seriousness of the situation, Jang Hee apologized and offered to leave if she was causing too much trouble. Chu Ting told her she needed to learn the rules of the modern world quickly, adding that she couldn't just run around like a vigilant and expect to remain unnoticed. A few hours later, Chu King decided to do his laundry. As he headed toward the washing machine with his pile of garbage-smelling clothes, Jang Hee followed, intrigued by where he was taking the biochemical weapon, and upon seeing the washing machine, she was fascinated. Chu King explained how it worked and how it was a lifesaver, cleaning clothes much faster and more efficiently than washing by hand. Excited, Jang Hee dashed back to her room to grab her dirty clothes and dump them into the machine. While loading the machine, Chu Ting noticed a strange piece of clothing among her laundry and curiously reached for it. Mortified, Jang Hee quickly snatched the garment out of his hands and in a flash, bolted out of the laundry room faster than the wind, leaving Chu Ting standing there stunned. Chu Ting, still puzzled by Jang Hee's earlier reaction, headed to the living room and noticed her feet were bound. Curiosity getting the better of him, he asked to see her feet, but Jang Hee firmly refused. Chu King started to wonder if her embarrassment over her bound feet was the reason she hadn't tried on the underwear he had bought for her earlier. However, his insensitive comment about such a sensitive topic enraged Jang Hee. She pulled out her sword and called Chu Ting a Dengtu Zai. She threatened to slice him into pieces with her sword and see what his arteries looked like.
What?
Chu Ting, terrified, screamed like a damsel in distress, causing Jang Hee to back down. Still shaken, Chu Ting quickly looked up the term Dengtu Zi online. He discovered that it referred to an ancient man who had married an extremely ugly woman with a face that could induce nightmares. Despite her appearance, Dengtu Zi was known for being the ultimate simp, having 5 equally disgusting face children with her, bringing more disaster into the world. Armed with this new information, Chu Ting approached Jang Hee again. He told her that he fully embraced being called a Dengtu Zi and, in fact, would be honored to be her ultimate simp.
Come on now, dawg.
Following this, Chu Ting showed Jang Hee a video on YouTube on how to put on plot armor. So a few minutes later, Chu Ting came back and thought Jang Hee had finally learned it, but the only thing she learned was that the people of the world were immoral and shameful to be dressing in such a manner. Frustrated, Chu King yelled back that in this era, women had the freedom to express themselves however they wanted. To diffuse the rising tension, Chu King decided to teach Jang Hee how to play a PC game, something that immediately caught her interest. She quickly became engrossed in the game, playing for hours. When Chu King finally asked her to stop, he offered to show her a popular gambling card game instead. Shortly afterward, they played the card game, with Chu Ting beating Jiang He multiple times. Feeling victorious, Chu Ting headed to his room for a nap, reflecting on how his life had changed since meeting Jiang He. He remembered how he'd been out job hunting the day they met and concluded that it was probably for the best he hadn't gotten the job. Babysitting a 1,200-year-old martial arts expert left no room for employment. After a few hours of rest, Chu Ting woke up and suggested to Jiang He that they go out for dinner instead of ordering takeout. He also advised her to let her hair down so people wouldn't recognize her as the sword-wielding lunatic who once roamed the staircase. A few moments later, they made their way downstairs and ran into Old Man Zhao. Upon seeing them together, Zhao asked if Chu Ting was taking his girlfriend out again, causing Chu Ting to blush with embarrassment. It was the first time someone had referred to him as having a girlfriend. Not knowing what to say, Chu Ting awkwardly explained that Jiang He was just a friend since no significant plot had developed yet. As they continued walking, Jiang He curiously asked what a girlfriend was. Chu King's heart raced as he tried to come up with a response, managing to mumble that a girlfriend was essentially just a friend. Unsatisfied with the answer, Jiang He questioned why he had denied her being his girlfriend, if it was the same thing as being a friend. Caught off guard, Chu King dodged the question by teasingly telling her that her brain was too dense and wasn't ready to grasp such complex concepts yet. As they strolled through the city, Jiang He was mesmerized by the beauty of the surroundings, marveling at how different it was from her own time. They eventually arrived at a restaurant, and Chu Ting ordered a variety of teas. Jiang He tried her tea but didn't enjoy the taste, so she asked to try Chu King's creamy tea. So Chu King asked her to make use of his long straw, since she was used to playing with long swords. Just then, Jiang He took a sip of Chu Ting creamy tea, and the beautiful taste of the tea gave her the hardest climax of her entire life. Later that evening, after a hearty dinner at the restaurant, Chu Ting suggested they continue their aimless stroll around the city, since they were both jobless. As they strolled, Chu King had the greatest 300 IQ idea and decided to take Jiang He to see the fireworks. So they headed to the train station, but when Jiang He saw the train, she was terrified and instinctively hid behind Chu Ting. However, Chu Ting reassured her that everything was fine, and they eventually boarded the train to the neighboring city. Upon their arrival, Chu Ting showed Jiang He the stunning night view, which left her in awe. She marveled at how far the world had progressed, 1,000 years beyond her own time. Chu King explained that the world had evolved far beyond the primitive era of sticks and stones she once knew. He gently reminded her that returning to her past might be impossible, and that it would be best for her to embrace this new world and learn to navigate it. Then, the moment they had been waiting for arrived, the fireworks began. As the sky lit up with vibrant colors, Chu King thought to himself that, despite her ancient origins, Jiang He truly belonged in this world. As he watched her, lost in thought, he asked what was on her mind. Jiang He quietly replied that she was thinking of her master, and how she wished her master could witness this spectacle as well. Moved by her words, Chu Ting encouraged her to enjoy the wonders of this world on behalf of her master, and welcomed her to the new era with open arms. The next morning, Jiang He stood by the window, watching a group of people gathered outside. Curious about the commotion, she called Chu Ting over to take a look. Chu King peered out the window and immediately recognized the group. It was a gathering of a priest and members performing an exorcism. Shortly after, Jiang He asked Chu Ting why people lived as if they were imprisoned in his world. Chu King explained that it was called a shut-in lifestyle, where a person chooses to stay indoors and avoid going out. Since he identified as a NEET, this lifestyle suited him perfectly. However, Jiang He expressed her desire to explore the world and not waste her life staying inside like a pathetic loser. Hearing this, Chu King told her that she wouldn't last 2 seconds outside on her own, because she was a complete broke-ass who didn't have 2 pennies to rub together. He added that even if she wanted to hunt for food, there were no forests or jungles nearby, leaving scavenging dumpsters as her only option. Chu Ting then reassured her that once the whole ghost situation was resolved, they could start going outside more often. Afterward, Chu King searched for any digital jobs Jiang He could take up to earn money in the meantime. He suggested she become a power leveler in a fantasy game, as it seemed like the best way for her to make money. However, he doubted if her sawdust brain could even grasp the game mechanics. Jiang He countered by saying that, since they were both losers, it would be better for her to just do something like watching online videos for money, as Chu King does. Just then, a knock on the door startled them. Chu Ting nearly shat his pants. fearing someone from his family had come over. In a panic, he shoved Jang Hee into a room and told her to stay quiet. When Chu King opened the door, he came face to face with his father, whose face looked worse than a pig dump. His father walked in and immediately began berating him, questioning why he was still a worthless loser after all the years of education he'd supposedly invested in. Chu King tried to explain that as long as he could pay his rent, there was no need to get a job. His father, clearly unimpressed, warned him that if he didn't find a job soon, his rent would be raised. As his father was about to leave, he suddenly noticed female clothes hanging by the window and assumed that Chu King had started cross-dressing. At that moment, Chu King realized he was caught between a rock and a hard place, and he opted for the lesser evil. He figured that if he didn't come clean about a girl being in the house, his nosy Aunt Chang would rat him out to his father anyway. So he revealed a half-truth. The clothes belonged to a girl, but the girl was his friend's sister, which left his father stunned. Chu King elaborated, saying his imaginary friend had traveled and entrusted him with taking care of his sister in his absence. With no other choice, Chu King brought out Jang Hee and introduced her to his father. The moment Jang Hee saw Chu King's father, she addressed him as dad, but Chu King quickly whispered to her, telling her to call him uncle instead. The old man was immediately suspicious, wondering why she would call him dad upon first meeting. He suspected there was more to the story and dragged Chu King into the living room, demanding the truth. Chu King stuck to his claim, insisting Jang Hee was just a friend's sister, not his girlfriend. Frustrated, Chu King then demanded his father return the spare key, arguing it was unnecessary for him to have access to the apartment. However, his father wasn't buying the story and accused Chu King of indulging in sinful behavior. Chu King, irritated, pointed out that he was an adult and could have a girlfriend if he wanted. He then transferred the rent money and reiterated his request for the spare key. Reluctantly, his father handed it over but warned him to get a job and stop playing husband when he wasn't even close to being a family man. As his father was leaving, he advised Chu King that dating at a young age would only bring trouble and more of it. He also suggested Chu King use protection because he didn't want another loser like him roaming the earth.
Emotional damage.
Just before his father reached the door, Chu King pointed to Jang Hee's ancient sandals and asked if they could be sold as antiques, considering his father's long history with antiques. Seeing the sandals, the old man was taken aback and asked how old they were. Chu King claimed they were from the Tang dynasty, dating back to the 12th century, and asked how much they might be worth. His father looked at him skeptically and said he had no idea about their value, but he was certain of one thing: Chu King needed psychological help because it was obvious he was smoking bamboo. Upon closer inspection of the sandals, Chu King realized it might be difficult convincing anyone that they were antiques, given how new they still looked. Nevertheless, he urged his father to take a closer look, reminding him of his 40 years of experience in antique sales. The old man examined the sandals but still couldn't believe they were 1,200 years old. Frustrated, he yelled at Chu King to stop staying cooped up inside and to get a job, claiming that being a shut-in was clearly affecting his brain. In response, Chu King retorted that he was self-employed, which only angered his father further. In a fit of rage, his father accidentally grabbed Jang Hee's sword and attempted to beat Chu King senseless with it. But just as the old man raised the sword to strike, he suddenly felt its weight, causing him to pause. Realizing that his father might discover the sword's true value as an ancient relic, Chu King quickly grabbed hold of it, trying to dismiss it as a cheap toy he had bought from some random loser. His father, however, wasn't convinced and insisted on inspecting the sword more closely, sending a wave of panic through Chu King. But after examining it, the old man refused to believe that his son could have stumbled upon an ancient treasure. He angrily threw the sword back at Chu King and stormed out of the apartment, shouting at the top of his lungs, reminding Chu King once again to get a job and stop being useless. As soon as his father left, Jang Hee emerged from her hiding place in the room. A few minutes later, Chu King and Jang Hee discussed the unexpected visit. Chu King told her that if his parents ever showed up unannounced in the future, she should call them uncle and auntie. Jang Hee then asked if Chu King was no longer interested in learning martial arts. Chu King thought about it and realized that martial arts weren't something he needed right now. There was no money in going around beating people up. It would just land him in jail with a mountain of charges. He told Jang Hee that he'd learn martial arts later, but for now, his priority was making money. He then proceeded to show Jang Hee an online game and explained how she could earn money by playing it for people who didn't have the time. Jang Hee was puzzled as to how playing games could translate into income. Chu King explained that not everyone was as jobless as they were. Some people worked long hours and didn't have time to play, so she could get paid to play the game for them. That evening at the police station, a random cop suggested ordering food, and at the mention of food, a literal human fowl enthusiastically stood up, cheering him on to get something to eat. Meanwhile, Kinho couldn't care less. He was completely uninterested in food and instead lamented how dull the day had been. No high-profile cases had come through. Hearing this, the random cop glanced at Kinho and warned him that the word boring should never be uttered in a police station. Just as the warning left his mouth, an emergency call came in, prompting the officers to rush out immediately. While driving to the scene, the random cop shared with Kinho a superstition. Every time someone complained about a boring day, fate would flip things upside down, filling the day with so much chaos they wouldn't even have time for a meal. When they arrived at the emergency site, they found nothing but a worthless drunk, locked out of his house by his wife for being an absolute waste. The drunkard revealed that he had made the emergency call and demanded that the cops help him reconcile with his crazy wife and let him back inside. The officers then knocked on the door, and when the wife came out, they calmly advised her to handle her family issues quietly, without disturbing the peace of the neighborhood. After wrapping up this critical emergency, they left, only for another emergency call to come through, proving the random cop's theory about fate and boring days. Meanwhile, back at Chu King's place, he woke up with a splitting headache. Worried, he decided to check on his antique wife, hoping she hadn't snuck out for her nightly ninja ghost escapades. He peeked into her room, and seeing she wasn't there, assumed the stubborn female goat had once again ignored his warnings and left to cause trouble in the neighborhood. As Chu Ting wandered into the living room, he spotted a mysterious figure wearing a hoodie and a mask. Sleepily, he assumed it was Jang Hee in her ninja attire, but when his vision cleared, he realized it was a burglar, so he screamed in shock and fear. Hearing Chu King scream, Jang Hee emerged from her room, annoyed that he was disturbing her sleep. As she entered the living room, she saw the burglar trying to escape. Without hesitation, she dashed toward him, suplexing him to the ground and pinning him down like a UFC fighter. Jang Hee was ready to go apeshit on the intruder, but Chu Ting frantically yelled for her to stop. He begged her not to crush the guy's worthless bones with her savage, calloused hands and insisted she release the burglar. Chu Ting couldn't shake the thought of how fiercely Jang Hee had attacked the burglar. If he hadn't stepped in, the guy's neck would probably be broken by now. To keep up appearances, Chu King pulled out his phone and pretended to call Kinho to report the incident. The moment the burglar saw this, he began begging for mercy, promising never to try such nonsense again unless he had a death wish. Pleading, he swore it was his first time breaking in, and with a UFC fighter like Jang Hee in the house, it would definitely be his last. Despite the burglar's desperate pleas, Chu Ting continued pretending he was going to report him, which led the useless thief to cling to his shorts, practically groveling. Finally, Chu King ordered him to leave the house the same way he came in. The ugly burglar quickly jumped through the broken window, and once outside, thanked Chu Ting for his mercy. Jang Hee, unimpressed, demanded to know why Chu King had let the burglar go so easily. Chu King explained that involving the police would have caused more problems for her, given her unresolved identity issues. After that, he casually told her to head to bed and did the same. The following morning, Chu Ting, while brushing his teeth, caught a glimpse of Jang Hee pointed flashbulbs as she walked out of her room. Seeing those beach balls expanded his Excalibur, so he tried to hide it by asking if Jang Hee had been practicing martial art in her room. The cultured fool then suggested she keep her door open during her intense training sessions so he could watch her in action. As they continued their morning, Chu Ting, still thinking about Jang Hee's desire to explore the world instead of being cooped up inside, decided they should have breakfast outside. A few minutes later, they were walking down the street to eat. As they strolled, Chu King shared some golden wisdom, telling Jang Hee that if she wanted to quickly understand the new world she was in, she needed to let go of her old ideas and knowledge, treating everything she saw as brand new. As they walked, Chu Ting advised Jang Hee not to act so impulsively like she did with the burglar, nearly sending the poor guy to the afterlife. He added that behavior like that could easily draw unwanted attention from the authorities, and that was something they absolutely didn't need right now. Jang Hee, however, reassured him that she had held back and hadn't gone full ape mode on the burglar. She then asked how much strength she should use next time, using a hypothetical scenario, like if Chu King tried sneaking into her room, for example. Taken aback by her comment, Chu King shouted, demanding to know why she'd even suggest something like that. He wasn't some kind of creep who would sneak into her room to do cultured things. Jang He, unfazed, shot back, saying he looked exactly like the kind of cultured creep who would. This made Chu King yell even louder, insisting he would never do such a thing. However, Chu King then asked if, for instance, he snuck into her room, what would she do to him? Jang He then revealed to him that she would pulverize his entire magnum dangle region, which gave Chu King a total shock. Shortly afterward, they entered a restaurant for breakfast. Jang He tried the buns and immediately fell in love with the taste. Chu King, pleased with her reaction, told her to get more if she liked them, but he was stunned when she ordered 10 more buns like her stomach was a bottomless pit. He pointed out that if she kept eating like she had a tank for a stomach, people would start to notice how strange she was and pry into her life. He urged her to eat like a normal human being, not like a starving hyena. After finishing breakfast, they began heading home, but a few minutes later, they passed by a buffet restaurant. Chu King, recalling how much Jang He loved food, casually mentioned that one day he'd take her to a buffet, so she could experience the luxury of eating a variety of dishes and stuffing her stomach to her heart's content. Before long, Chu King bought the latest Android smartphone for Jang He, telling her she could now call him anytime and from anywhere. Moments later, he mentioned that he was heading out and might be back late, so she should enjoy exploring her new phone or playing the online game in the meantime. After stepping outside, Chu King boarded a cab and headed to his parents' home to visit his mom. Upon arriving, Chu King couldn't find his mom but saw his dad instead. He asked about her whereabouts, and the old man revealed that she was out gambling, suggesting Chu King give her a call to let her know he was around. Then, without missing a beat, his father asked why Chu King came alone and didn't bring his babe. Chu King, for the umpteenth time, explained that Jang He was just a friend who was staying with him temporarily, and there was nothing romantic going on. However, his father's cultured mind refused to believe it, insisting there had to be something more developing between them. His dad then asked if Jang He were a guy, would Chu King still allow her to stay at his place? Chu King, clearly annoyed, pointed out that Kinho had also stayed with him before. But his father dismissed that, saying Kinho didn't count as a guy because he was too weak and could easily be mistaken for an unattractive girl. Bored and frustrated with the conversation, Chu King decided to change the subject by calling his mom. After a while, Chu King mentioned to his dad that a burglar had broken into his house earlier. Upon hearing this, his father was shocked, wondering what on earth was worth stealing in Chu King's place to even attract a burglar. Just then, Chu King's mom came home, heading straight into the kitchen to prepare dinner. As she cooked, she asked about Chu King's supposed girlfriend, and Chu King, exasperated, reiterated that he didn't have one and that she needed to stop listening to his father's nonsense yappings. While serving dinner, his mother asked to see the girl who was staying with him. Reluctantly, Chu King handed her his phone and showed her pictures of Jang He. His mom's eyes lit up, and she excitedly declared that her son might not die of the card holder after all. Utterly embarrassed, Chu King snatched his phone back from her, but she couldn't stop praising Jang He, clearly over the moon. Chu King's mother couldn't stop wondering why, despite Chu King's constant claims of having nothing to do with Jang He. The weirdo had over 1 million pictures of her in different positions on his phone. In her mind, they clearly had something going on, but were just covering it up. As they sat down for dinner, she started interrogating Chu King, asking where his supposed girlfriend was studying. Chu King sighed and replied that Jang He wasn't studying at all, explaining that she was just a poor girl. Before Chu King could finish, his father jumped in, saying it made perfect sense. In his eyes, a girl who was a top student would never be interested in dating their riceless, stinky loser son. His words stung, but Chu King ignored him. After dinner, Chu King prepared to head back home, but not before urging his mom to quit her gambling habit and try being a more caring wife to his father. Just as he was about to leave, his mother suddenly remembered hearing rumors about a scary female ghost lurking around Chu King's apartment building. Chu King confirmed the rumors, using it as leverage to demand that his father cut his rent in half, claiming nobody would want to rent a haunted apartment. His father, however, wasn't buying any of the ghost stories and flatly refused to reduce the rent. Later that night, Chu King arrived home to a strange sight. Jang He was clutching her sword in a weird manner. The moment she saw him, the crazy psychotic chick darted toward the bathroom, claiming she needed a shower. Chu Ting, baffled by her behavior, asked if someone had broken into the house again. Jiang He replied that no one had, so he asked why she was holding onto her sword so tightly as if she were defending herself. Without answering, she rushed into the bathroom, leaving Chu Ting to guess what had spooked her. As Jiang He took her shower, Chu King's cultured imagination started running wild. He began to picture her, fully unclad, masturbating with her long sword in hand. Realizing how ridiculous and cultured his thoughts had become, he shook his head so fast, like he was trying to blend a smoothie in his brain to brush off the nasty thoughts. A few moments later, Jiang He emerged from the bathroom, drying her hair with a blow dryer. Noticing how radiant she looked, Chu Ting couldn't help but ask, half-jokingly, if practicing martial arts could make someone glow. Jiang He gave him a look, clearly thinking she'd gotten involved with a total crackhead, and then told him that she had wanted to teach him some martial arts techniques, but figured he was too weak to learn anything useful. Chu King briefly entertained the thought of martial arts training but dismissed it. In this Gen Z era, everyone paid for gym subscriptions and still struggled to reach their body goals, let alone survive a martial arts class. Choosing to move past the topic, Chu King asked if the priest who had been invited to exorcise the ghost had finally done his job. He then added that the priest was a total scam, fooling the residents into believing he was performing some sort of exorcism, when in reality, there was no ghost, just an ancient maniac having one of her deranged episodes. Chu King further speculated that Jiang He's nocturnal, ninja-like movements were probably the real reason the residents mistook her for a ghost. He'd assured her that as long as she toned down her midnight antics, she'd be fine. However, he noticed that Jiang He was still gripping her sword tightly. Curious, he asked why she was holding onto it so intensely. Then, dropping a bombshell, Jiang He revealed that there had been a ghost in the house while Chu Ting was away at his parents'. Chu Ting, taken aback, reminded her that there was no ghost and that the residents were just confusing her with the supposed spirit. But Jiang He doubled down, insisting that she had indeed seen a ghost when he wasn't around. At that moment, Chu Ting almost got scared himself, but quickly brushed it off, reminding himself that Jiang He wasn't exactly a reliable source when it came to normal matters. He figured she had probably seen an ugly neighbor wearing a face mask and mistaken it for a ghost. Still, out of curiosity, he asked her to describe the supposed ghost she had seen. Jiang He began with chilling detail. The ghost had hair longer than hers, a pale, ghastly face, and an overall freaky aura that left Chu Ting utterly petrified. As she continued painting a vivid picture of this eerie figure, Chu Ting couldn't take it anymore and yelled at her to stop before he ended up having a heart attack. He was sweating buckets, practically petrified, but tried to summon every ounce of confidence to avoid looking like a terrified sissy. In an attempt to dismiss the whole thing, he told Jiang He that ghosts simply didn't exist and that it wasn't scientifically proven. But Jiang He remained firm, saying she didn't know if even her sword would be enough to defeat such a supernatural entity. Chu Ting, not wanting to dwell on it any longer, urged her to stop thinking about it and go to sleep, promising they'd figure things out in the morning. However, throughout that night, Chu Ting couldn't sleep at all. His mind was racing, and every little creak and shadow in the room made him jump. He took showers, 10 of them, hoping to calm his nerves, but it was no use. He was sweating and scared, jumping out of his skin like a character in a Ninity's cartoon horror show. Since sleep wasn't an option, Chu King decided to distract himself by watching a movie and editing some videos on his laptop. Meanwhile, in Jiang He's room, she was also wide awake, lost in her thoughts. She stared at the clothes she had been wearing on the day she found herself in this strange new world. Her mind wandered back to the 12th century, to her small village. She remembered the rough-bearded village chief, always pushing her to excel in martial arts and never show mercy. Her memories then turned to her young miss, the kind woman who had always helped her mend her clothes and took care of her. Tears welled up in Jiang He's eyes as she missed them dearly, feeling the weight of her past. Suddenly, she heard a knock on her door. Opening it, she found Chu King standing there, holding his laptop. With a smirk, he showed her a movie clip of a female ghost and asked if that was what she had seen. The moment Jiang He laid eyes on the screen, she jumped back in fright, instinctively reaching for her sword. Her reaction confirmed Chu King's suspicion. She had confused a movie scene with reality. Seeing her reaction, Chu King chuckled softly and closed his laptop, reassuring her that there was no ghost to worry about. The next morning, Jiang He got out of bed, surprised the ghost hadn't shown up after she had geared up to slice it with her sword. Thinking it was safe, she decided to continue her swordplay training. As promised, she left the door open so Chu Ting could watch her train. After a few intense hours, she took a break in the sitting room. Chu Ting, on his way to grab some milk, walked by and couldn't stop staring at her. His mind wandered to a bizarre alternate reality where, instead of Jang He, her village chief had appeared in this world. That would have been a mess. He'd probably be locked up for showing up with a sword, just like Jang He. Curiosity got the best of him, so he asked what the village chief looked like. Jang He casually revealed that her chief was tall, ripped, and bearded like Dwayne Johnson. Meanwhile, at Qin Hao's place, he dragged himself home after a long day at work to find his dad chilling in the living room. He asked if there was any lunch, and his dad mentioned there was porridge, and as he had some porridge and headed back to the sitting room, his dad asked him if he had finally caught any thief. Qin Hao revealed that catching a thief these days is harder than getting 1 million views on YouTube. The savage dad then revealed to him that as weak and useless as Chu Ting, his friend, was, he managed to catch a thief even though he wasn't a police officer. Hearing this information collapsed Qin Hao's brain walls, causing him to nearly choke on his porridge. He couldn't believe Chu Ting could beat down and even catch a thief when he had never touched a criminal in his entire life as a cop. The savage old god didn't stop there. He went on to reveal that even with Chu King's negative rees, he still managed to clap a baddie who lived with him, while Qin Hao, in his entire worthless life, had never been able to get a girlfriend. Hearing these words from his father crushed Qin Hao's ego, so he tried to salvage his already dead steez and told his brutal father that he had a girlfriend called Imagination. So his father asked if he had started calling his hands Imagination.
What?
Qin Hao then delivered a massive clapback and pointed out that the apple indeed didn't fall far from the tree, hinting at how ugly his father was. Hearing this, the old man got enraged and pulled out his slippers to reshapening the brain-dead dimwit's head. After the brutal exchange with his dad, Qin Hao got a call from Chu Ting, inviting him to hang out that night. Already fuming over how this idiot was somehow living his dream, Qin Hao snapped and told him to go hang out with the devil in hell instead. Chu Ting, unfazed, called up another one of his wild friends, who instantly agreed to hit the club. After the call, Chu King told Jang He that she'd be tagging along so he could show her around and give her a taste of modern life. Out of the blue, Jang He remembered the ghost from a horror movie she had mistaken for the real deal and asked why people in this world would create something so fake. Chu Ting launched into an explanation about how people enjoy movies to fulfill their psychological needs once their basic needs are met. He went on to explain how, in this world, people pay others to handle tasks for them, and basically, everyone's shelling out cash to get their problems solved. He further enlightened her that everything in this modern world is transactional. Everyone needs something, and they'll pay whoever can get it done. Curious, Jang He then asked if his reason for taking her in was transactional or if he was just trying to meet some psychological need. Chu Ting, with a shrug, revealed that he took her in simply because he felt like it. It wasn't transactional at all. Hearing that, Jang He was pleased and started to believe Chu King was genuinely a good person without any hidden motives. Later that night, they headed to the club to cut loose. Chu King explained that the whole point of bringing her here was to give her a unique experience that would help shape her understanding of modern life. As soon as they stepped inside, Jang He was immediately captivated by the flashing strobe lights and spinning disco balls. They didn't get far before they bumped into Chu King's wild crew, who were already well into their drinks and insisted they jump straight into karaoke. With all the noise and blaring music at the club, Jang He felt a little out of place. Noticing her discomfort, Chu King offered her some nuts, telling her to crack them open and enjoy. But with the music so loud, Jang He didn't catch a word, so Chu King had to shout his instructions again, explaining that the nuts were tough to crack and would need a bit of force. Jang He grabbed one and, with a single squeeze, effortlessly shattered it, popping the kernel into her mouth. The moment she tasted the nut, it hit her like a brain freeze from sheer deliciousness. Meanwhile, Chu Ting watched in awe, wondering if she was secretly a gorilla because of the way she cracked those nuts like it was nothing. A few minutes later, Chu Ting grabbed a bottle of beer and called over one of his wild friends, Wang Zi, to join in for a toast. Gulping down the beer like a seasoned pro, Chu Ting caught Jang He's curious stare. She asked if she could try it, but Chu Ting was hesitant, worried that alcohol might fry the few brain cells she had left. After some persistent pleading from Jang He finally caved in and handed her the bottle, warning her only to take a small sip. Excited, Jang He tried it but immediately made a face. Disappointed, she told Chu Ting that the beer tasted terrible and wasn't at all what she expected. Shortly after, Chu Ting noticed that Jang He was getting hungry, so he told her a massive birthday cake was on its way. That news lit up her face like a kid on Christmas. Meanwhile, Wang Zai handed Shu Ting the microphone, urging him to jump into the karaoke action. When Jiang Yi saw the microphone, she curiously leaned in, wondering if it was similar to Shu Ting's willy. Clueless about what the long, thick object was, she asked indirectly. Her voice, amplified by the microphone, echoed through the club, startling her. Shu Ting quickly explained it was called a microphone and promised to describe how it worked later. After a cringeworthy karaoke session, Wang Zi announced that it was time to cut his girlfriend's birthday cake. However, when he called her up, he realized she had ghosted him and left the club. Panicked, Wang Zi went searching for her, only to discover that the cold-hearted bitch had bailed on him completely, leaving him stranded and heartbroken. A bit later, inside the club, Shu Ting approached a dejected Wang Zai, who was still processing the fact that his ride or die had left him riding solo. Shu Ting then asked when he had bagged this hottie. Wang Zai told him they had hit it off about a month ago, and he had genuinely fallen for her. When Jiang Yi overheard the word girlfriend, she innocently asked Shu Ting if it meant wife. Embarrassed, Shu Ting quickly clarified that girlfriend meant something entirely different in his world. Thinking fast, he pulled a line from the player's ultimate handbook and told her a girlfriend is just someone else's future wife. As Wang Zai watched Shu Ting and Jiang Yi together, curiosity got the best of him, and he asked if they were dating. However, Shu Ting wasn't ready to have a dating conversation with the simp who had just been dumped while celebrating his girlfriend's birthday. So Shu Ting changed the topic and asked they catch up on old times instead. Wang Zai then stared down his watch and realized he was getting late, so he left the club, telling Shu Ting they would catch up later. A few minutes later, Shu Ting began to hear background voice talking about him and the new chick he was with. So he turned to see Liang Zi, his roommate in college, who asked how Shu Ting was able to coop the salon close to him, hinting at Yang He. The mofo then asked Shu Ting to give him some tips on how he could bag one himself, but Shu Ting revealed to him that with his Voldemort face, it was impossible for him to get laid anytime soon. Later on, Liang Zi raised his glass for a toast, but Shu Ting wasn't having it. He didn't want anything to do with the guy and threatened to smash his face and if he kept acting like they were cool. Just as tensions rose, Wang Zai re-entered the club and saw the two closing in on each other like they were about to start a round of Mortal Kombat. He quickly rushed over and told them to chill. Liang Zi, unfazed, turned to Wang Zi and insisted that he was cool with Shu Ting and had no idea why the dude was so hyped. That only made Shu Ting angrier. Fuming, Shu Ting demanded to know who had invited Four Eyes to the birthday party, and Wang Zai admitted he was the one who had brought him along. Liang Zi explained that he just wanted to offer a toast and that their beef had ended ages ago and he was over it. But Shu Ting clearly wasn't. He promised to give Liang Zi another senseless beating like he had before. Wang Zai, stuck in the middle, tried to calm things down, urging them to squash their differences once and for all. Later, Wang Zi pulled Shu Ting aside to ask what had happened between him and Liang Zi. Shu Ting didn't offer much detail but admitted that just the sight of Liang Zi made him cringe and he should never have been invited. After their conversation, Shu Ting turned to Jiang Yi, who was still completely confused about the whole confrontation. She asked him why he hated Liang Zi so much and couldn't stand to be around him. Shu Ting told her it was simple. The guy was ugly, and even an ad-generated dude would look better. In the heat of the moment, Wang Zi's girlfriend, the birthday celebrant, walked back into the club. On seeing her, Wang Zi immediately ordered the waiters to bring the cake back out. As soon as the massive cake rolled in, Jiang Yi's eyes were glued to it, mesmerized. She eagerly asked Shu Ting if everything on the cake was edible, and he confirmed it was, but something felt off. Shu Ting stared intently at the cake, sensing something wasn't right. What could possibly be wrong? And what could have sparked such deep-seated hatred between Shu Ting and Liang Zi? Comment, Ancient Girl, if you're eager to find out in our part 2. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content like this. As always, thanks for watching.